So last year, I had the pleasure to be the general rapporteur, that is the main the content leader for the Congress, for the ISOCARP Congress in Jakarta. You see the images here in this video, and you will see me with an orange jacket in a second. The Congress reunited in Jakarta about 700 experts and concluded, or for 4 or 5 days, we discussed the nature of cities, the best practice, the best ideas, the best tools to manage cities in the future, and the importance of cities. And we came up with a Jakarta, what we call the Jakarta Declaration, that is effectively in just 12 points, 2 pages, the main messages, the main content of what needs to be looked at. What needs to be looked at in the future as part of city management. And you have the declaration as part of your information packs. I'm sure you will be given the declaration, and I really strongly recommend that you look at it very carefully. The 12 points are now condensed here, but I'm going just to present 3 of them. The first one, cities are the engine of prosperity. In short, the point is a little bit longer in the declaration itself. Something that was raised already both by Didier and Eric. Planning needs to be across scales. Cities have relationship across scales and government levels, from the macro scale to the micro scales. And that's number 5, point number 5 of the declaration. And then point number 7. Interlinkages are essential, considering the relationship between city and the interland is essential, but particularly the spatial justice between a growing city and the rural area around it. So I'll try to explain what that means, these 3 points, what does that mean? And hopefully that will help you to look at all of the other 9 points. I chose 3 just for a matter of time. It's not that these 3 are more important than the others. So cities are, Eric just said, cities can change the world. Cities are the engine of prosperity. You probably have seen this graph from this magic date of 2008. More than 50% of the population has been living in cities, and ever since that proportion is growing. But very important are also these numbers here on the right-hand side. Cities produce 70% of the wealth of the world. And they host 55% and growing of the population, but they occupy only 2% of the land. So this is a crude assessment, but what it is, is just easy numbers to remember. Cities are 2% of the land and 70% of the wealth. So you, as the administrators, the managers of cities, the mayors, you are in charge of these numbers, of these very dense productive areas, that is 2% of the land for 70% of the wealth. And this is an average in the world, but it's also true in Indonesia. These charts here, each pie is one single metropolitan area, one single urban area in Indonesia, and the white is the rest of the province, the GDP of the rest of the province. And so you can see that the proportion are about the same here as well. In some cases, the province, the white part of the pie, contains another city as well. But you see how important cities are in the production, in the GDP, in the wealth of Indonesia. Without Indonesian cities, Indonesia will not be as prosperous as it can possibly be. And another important chart is this one, is not academically correct. I'm sure that people will question, but it is trying to compare the GDP of cities, and here is the selection of Indonesian cities, with the revenues, the yearly revenues of some of the global companies. So you can see here that the GDP of Jakarta is comparable in size to the annual revenues of Toyota, and Toyota is the largest automotive company in the world by revenue. And also that Surabaya is catching up with Google, with the scale of Google. And other cities in Indonesia are comparable to Nike, Coca-Cola, Gucci, whatever. Big international companies produce the same amount of wealth as some of the Indonesian cities. This is just an ideological concept. It's just to make you understand that you, as the mayors, you as the city administrators, you as the managers of the city, you are like the CEOs and board of directors of companies. You have the same wealth that you have to manage in your hands. So in the same way that Toyota produces a business plan, a marketing plan, a facilities management plan, so in the same way, cities have to manage themselves with the same complexity and the same energy. But that is not only that. The skills required by mayors and city leaders are very much comparable to the CEOs. A mayor needs to be, and the key administrator need to be forward-looking. They have to have strong leadership. They have to be able to transform and innovate. But unlike CEOs of companies, they have much, much bigger responsibilities. Instead of having responsibilities for production and shareholders and employees, you also have a variety of population. You also have very complex infrastructure, sometimes not very efficient. You also have responsibility with to the planet as a whole. So much, much bigger responsibilities than that a CEO will ever have. So I don't know whether you ever thought, you ever made this comparison. The wealth of cities is comparable to the wealth produced by companies, and you have to manage a city with the same effort, energy, and skills. So I would like to ask you the question, how do you feel your role is? How do you behave? How is the administration behave? They have the feeling that the city is managed like a big company, a big efficient company every single day. And for those who say sometimes or never, just think about it. What you need to take, how can you make things better? How can you make the sometimes into frequently, the never into sometimes? The next section is, what do you need? You have, I think, so what do you need to become more like an efficient board of director for your own city? The second topic is about planning cities across scale. So the city is in the middle and needs to have a relationship with its own province, the region, and the state, its role in the state. And the regional area is very important, but also within the city itself, the different districts and how they relate to each other, and the neighborhoods. So the planning on the side, the planning towards the outside needs to be strategic. It needs to be long-term and be outward-looking. Is the relationship with the country, with the area around it, and maybe internationally in some cases, for some of the most important cities. And of course, there is looking at the role and the direction of the city in the context of the overall area. Eric talked about corridors and clusters. So what is the role of the individual city within a much bigger system of cities or territorial entities and the hinterland? And then at the other end, planning. So on one side, it is strategic planning, and on the other side is more tactical and detailed. And that means that it needs to look at opportunities and the reason why things are done, and how one capitalize on the function of the city and creating a strong identity, character, quality of life, all that was in that will that Eric presented at the very beginning of his own talk. but also the style of planning, the style of doing things is different from one side and the other. Towards the larger scale is through collaboration. That is because there are different authorities there. There are authorities in the governors, the other cities, etc. So it's collaboration between authorities that have equal powers. And then instead, at the district, neighborhoods level, the tactical planning needs to be by consensus and through local support. There is no way that a good neighborhood can be planned without having the local support of the people that live there or that will live there in future. So just to bring it real, just a quick example from a very different place, that is Oman, that is where I'm working at the moment. Oman has a number of secondary cities and one medium-scale capital city. And there, planning went across different scales and different strategies. So the role of cities could not be defined without understanding better how the regions related to each other. And so after an analysis of all of the regions and the strengths and weaknesses of each region, that was brought to the national scale. That sparked national debates across authorities and created a national vision, which then was tested again at the regional scale. Could the regions deliver that vision? And then was brought down to the city scale. Could the cities develop to fulfill that region, and did they want to? Did people in those cities, were they ready to fulfill that national vision? And so that gradually went back and forth until a strategy that matched a national agenda to the regional agenda to the city agenda was all agreed. And then with that started the identification of investment zones, and in specific areas, regeneration, economic zones, development drivers at the local level, which also, of course, fed into the national strategy for investment. And then within that, how to have local distinctiveness, how to make cities all different from each other and all attractive for what they are. So the system of planning is across scales and across different stakeholders and different styles of collaboration and dialogue. And now I want to raise one issue, and I see, many of you, I don't know how you feel about this, but it's something I feel very, very strongly. In many places where I work, there is this idea that celebrity architecture, signature architecture is the solution to all problems, is a sign that cities are successful. If one has a twisted skyscraper, that is a sign that the city is going in the right direction. And that is not true. This type of developments are not necessarily wrong, but they are not the magic remedy. They should not be confused with good planning and to city success. First of all, they need to make sense at the large scale. They need to make strategic sense. There is no need in a medium scale city that to have a skyscraper hotel when people actually want to go to the beach and want to enjoy the streets, for example. Or there is no sense to have big, big buildings of offices when there is no demand. But also, very particularly, big developments like this need to be able to make a local contribution. They need to make local contribution to the character, the quality of life locally. They have to bring something more than just the building itself. And particularly this concept of land value capture, that is, they are big investment, they generate a lot of wealth, and some of that wealth needs to be used for the tactical improvement of the rest of the city. And I'm inviting another speaker to help me with a short video by Martin Smolka. It is how to use investment tactically, how to use development tactically to generate funding, not only for the development itself, but for the improvement of the city as a whole.